and a common source amplifier is the second stage. So in order to bias the differential amplifier, what we do, we bias the tail current source. So this NMOS. So I am biasing this using a DC voltage source. V1 in V1, Vn, V in 1 and V in 2 are the two inputs, and there is a V sign input just to check the transient response. Okay. So we'll look at the voltage sources first, what I've used. So this is the supply voltage of 1.8 volt. So for biasing, I'm using a voltage of 400 millivolt. So I'm trying to keep the current low. That's why I'm using a low voltage. So this one is for V in 1. So I have a DC offset of 700 millivolt and an AC signal amplitude of 1 volt. And V in 2, I'm keeping the DC same and the AC amplitude 0. I want to see the gain. So if I keep 1 volt here, because it's a differential amplifier, the overall gain will be 0. So in just order to see the gain, I'm just keeping it 0. You can either keep the AC amplitude in V in 1 or V in 2. Since this is in open loop, so you have to give both V in 1 and V in 2. And this is the sine wave. So the DC offset, I'm keeping a 700 millivolt and a 5 millivolt sine wave amplitude and a 10 kilohertz frequency. So any questions so far?
I'll just add few points. This is the op-amp circuit towards the right, which is having the MOSFETs. But the supply voltage is a single supply voltage between VDD and ground.
Yes.
So since we need the reference voltage somewhere in between or towards the middle of this VDD and ground, so that's why he has given an offset of around 700 millivolt, DC offset. Okay, and so Arnab, can you please briefly explain which part is the differential amplifier, which part is the output
Yeah,
stage, the
sure.
common source?
So this
Source follower.
Yeah, okay. This section is the differential amplifier. So you have two inputs and a single double-ended, single-ended output. So output is single output, and we have two inputs. And this part is the common source amplifier. So we have seen common source amplifier using the NMOS as input in the last class. So here we are using the PMOS as input and NMOS as load. I told you previously that we can do this as well. And this is our output. So we're taking output from this node. So this is a two-stage op-amp. First stage is our differential amplifier. Second stage is a common source amplifier.
Okay. Yeah. Any other question from others?
Could you explain why we give the input only at V in 2? Why not 180-degree
No,
opposite phase?
yeah, you can give it a D in 1 as well. But then you have to keep V in 1 AC amplitude 0 and V in 2 AC amplitude 1.
Sir, but for differential amplifier, should we not give it opposite phase? Like
You can give it opposite phase. See, I'm giving.
And
so
in
if
both.
if you
Sir,
give it opposite phase, your gain will be double. It will show you double gain. That's what. So you give +1 and -1. You're saying.
Yes, sir.
So I'm giving 1 and 0. So difference is 1. In that case, the difference will be 2. 1 minus -1, 2.
Okay, sir. So, but even then we could divide. If we take the gain, then it would be division of the amplitudes. If I'm so we out by suppose we out we get an amplitude VTP
In
of
this case,
10.
it will be V out by 1 volt. In
Yes, sir.
that case,
In
it will
that,
be V out by 2 volt.
so sir, like it is fine if we give it. It's not a
Yeah,
problem.
it's fine, it's fine. But you can't give same in both V in 1 and V in 2. Then your gain
Yes,
will
sir.
be 0.
Yes, sir. The phase has to be. And
Yeah, there
sir,
has to be.
what does this dotted line mean in between the NMOS load and PMOS amplifier?
What dotted line? I don't
The
understand.
second
Sir,
stage.
This one.
sir, the connection between the PMOS amplifier, the second stage, and the NMOS load, diode load is a dotted line.
This one.
Yes, sir.
No, this is not a dotted line. So this is the output is selected for this. This is a red out. The output of this wire will appear in red color. That's what. Just hold on. I'll show you in the
Okay, sir.
circuit. So this is it. It is not a dotted line. It's actually a circuit because I made the output was selected. That's why it was showing in red in
Okay.
color.
Okay. Sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other question?
Why is V sign there? Like already an
So
AC amplitude of one.
V sign has got nothing to the AC analysis. This is for the transient response. I'll just show you how much the transient signal will gain.
Okay.
Okay, we can continue.
Okay. So next we'll see the sizes. So I'm keeping a minimum size of W by L of 1 for the tail current source. So before this, these two has to have similar size, and these have to have similar size. I think you know this for differential amplifier. These MOS and this MOS will have similar sizes, and this will have similar sizes. So I'm showing the size of only one of them. The other one will be same. So this is I have keeping a W by L of 10, and for this one, since this is a load, I have given WL a smaller value 3. This is a WL of 30, and since this is a load, I've given WL 3. So we can just run the simulation, AC simulation. So we have to check and save. The error is because the V sign is not connected anywhere. So when you have any open wire, it will give you a warning. This is the output. So our input was 1 volt and our output is 28 volts. So you're getting a gain of over 28 times. So like the previous one, you can see the gain and phase. Go to results, direct plot, AC gain and phase. Click on the output wire and the input wire. So the bottom one is our gain and the top one is our phase. We can measure the phase response by seeing the phase. So we have phase response close to 75 degrees for this design. Next, what you can do, we will just replace this V in 1 with a V sign and see the transient response. We just select the transient response. So our V sign was 10 kilohertz signal, so I'm just taking 200 microsecond time period. It will cover some of the periods. For AC, I'm taking it up to 100 megahertz. So this is our input. So input has a peak to peak of 10 millivolts, and our output has a peak to peak of close to 300 millivolts. So just to show you the gain of the op amp.
Yeah, the waves are not so clear in this.
Okay, just I'll go to the remote desktop.
Yeah, preferably.
Let me see. Okay, this is our input one. Can you see it now?
Yeah, much clearer.
Okay, this is our input wave. 10 millivolt peak to peak, and this is our output wave close to 200 millivolt peak to peak. Okay. So any question?
Okay, you can proceed.
So I have this up to this simulations. So if you have any questions or you want any other simulations, I can do it in the remote session.
Sir, the plots you just showed.
Yeah.
So the gain that we gain from this plot, is it the open loop gain or closed loop? I didn't
This
understand.
is open loop. This is open loop. Unless I connect my output to any of the input, it is not going to be closed loop. This is all open loop.
It is about it's one. It's about one.
No, it's not 1. It's 28.
Oh, sorry, I missed it. Sales maybe.
No. So
And
if
the
you look at it,
NMOS
this thing. If you look at, see the peak to peak from here to here. 705 to 695. It's 10 millivolt peak to peak, right? Input 1. And from the output is 320 to 620, 300 millivolt. So 300 by 10 is close to 30, right?
So this op-amp is not very much optimized for extremely high gain. Typically, ideally, op-amp should have infinite gain, but this is a practical op-amp first of all, and secondly, it's not very optimized for very large gain kind of design. Okay, so you will actually see in another in the next video with LT Spice, Ritvik will be describing in further detail about how you can actually connect the closed loop configuration and how do you optimize certain sizing of the transistors based on biasing parameters and your requirements. So we'll see that subsequently. But so far, this is an open loop op-amp circuit and with 28 or whatever decibel of gain. And we can definitely
So-
size the transistors and increase the gain, open loop gain. Yes.
lower NMOS 2V, so that has like a length of 540 nanometer or what? Like I don't think I can see it clearly.
Yeah, it's 540.
And so like, why is it like W by L is 1 in this, and the others we have kept W by L is like what, 10 or something, right?
No, this is just to, this is for biasing. It will just provide you the current for this differential amplifier. Based on the current requirements you have, you can change this.
Yeah.
This
So
MOS, so if you differential amplifier, this MOS does not play any role in the gain of the overall differential amplifier. In your DC analysis, you don't consider. So from, if you remember the AC analysis, from here we just ground this and do a half circuit and do the analysis, right?
Yes, yes. Oh.
So why there is a 0 voltage source between GND and actual ground?
This is just because I'm keeping an alias. So this is my ground, alias ground. So I'm just keeping it at a 0 volt. I cannot connect any wire directly to this ground symbol. It will give you an error. So you have to keep a source, a DC source, a 0 volt DC source, which will act as your ground.
So that's just for cadence. There are certain rules that either you have to copy paste that ground connection symbol everywhere, wherever you need it, or you just put something in between and name that node, upper node of VDC equal to 0 as ground. So that's a label. GND, small GND is the label that he has used all over the circuit. So if the circuit is very large, then you need to put ground at many nodes, and that sometimes space takes a lot of space in the schematic area. So rather than that, he just used some sort of alias or some sort of label, so which gets connected. So wherever you write that white colored small GND, so that gets automatically shorted to that particular node. Same for VDD also, you can see for V0 also upper terminal of V0 is small VDD in white, and same thing for the circuit. You go towards the upper side VDD. That label is copied. So wherever, if you correctly write that name at both the places or more than 2 places, so all the nodes are automatically gets connected in Cadence. So that's called alias. And alias are connected through correct labeling. Now, in our next part, actually, I kept this part at the beginning because this is just open loop configuration and the simulation of open loop op-amp design. In the next part, we'll see actually how the closed loop op-amp designs are made and how to consider biasing. So in this case, your VB, at least VB, which is the biasing voltage, is independent voltage source has been used. But in practical cases, suppose you're making an op-amp chip for which you'd like to develop as a part of a product, an integrated circuit product. In that case, the biasing circuit should be within the circuit itself, basically within the chip itself. So the biasing should not be a separate pin unless it is really required and in its feature. So the biasing part will always stay within the chip, and we'll see in the LTSpice part where Ritvik has already included the biasing part by using a current mirrored circuit. So we'll see actually in that. But do you have any other question in this particular schematic? Okay, I get to see Joy Smitha has joined. Okay, can you tell me why did you come late?
Hello, sir.
Yeah. So why
Yes,
you were late?
actually,
I already.
sir, I was having some connectivity issues. Means the net was not getting connected.
Okay, so I'll be giving you some assignment correction work later on, and you have to do those things offline and then submit me the marks for that. Okay, I'll give you the instructions for that separately along with other teams.
Okay. So will I remain here now or will I leave?
No, you can leave. I've marked
Okay,
you
sir.
as.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
So any other question on Cadence part? I don't know from where the sound was coming. Anyways, any other question for Arnab? Okay, since it's done. So Arnab, thank you very much. You can actually leave. And also, I'm going to check your book chapter sometime later. Okay, in another few days. Okay, thank you, Arnab. You can stop sharing your screen. Yeah. So Ritvik, can you please now share your screen and start with the first video?
Yes, sir. Actually, I don't have access. Can you please provide me?
You don't have access. Let me see. No, I gave you the access. Ritvik, I already gave you the access.
Sir, actually, someone is muting me again and again.
Oh, is it? Just a moment. I'm trying to again reconfigure it. Ritvik, can you now share the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah.
Sir, are you able to see my screen?
Yes. Yeah, I can see.
Okay.
You can start.
Okay. So in this session, we are going to design operational amplifier and its two amplifier configurations, non-inverting and inverting. So
Ritvik, just a little interruption. Sorry. Can you please move that sharing tray towards left or right? Because it's right at the middle. The teammicroscope.com sharing.
okay, sir. Yeah, I'll hide it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
So the prefix operational is added to this amplifier because it can perform a variety of mathematical operations. Like it can add two signals, it can subtract them. We can do exponentiation, logarithm, differentiation, integration, and many more operations. So inside this op-amp, there are a number of stages being connected. Okay, so there might be one or more than one stages of a differential amplifier, followed by a gain stage, which is usually a common source amplifier. Then there is a level shifter. The task of level shifter is to eliminate any DC which might be coming from the previous stages, because it is a very high gain amplifier. So any DC which might be coming from the previous stages might overwhelm the output. It might saturate the output. So that needs to be removed. So that is the task of level shifter. And finally, there is an emitter follower or common collector, common drain amplifier, which will just work as a buffer stage, having very high input impedance and low output impedance. So these are two amplifier configurations.
One point. Ritvik, please, previous slide, please.
Yes.
Go to the, yeah. So here, so instead of emitter follower, we'll use source follower because we are using MOSFETs in our TSMC 180 nanometer design. Emitter follower basically came traditionally in the traditional op-amps. They were using BJTs, and that's why the name is here. But we will use source follower instead. Okay, you can continue. Thanks.
So these are two configurations for op-amp amplifier. The first one is a non-inverting amplifier. Non-inverting because input is connected to positive terminal or non-inverting terminal of op-amp. And of course, there is a negative feedback by this resistance R1, which is connected between output terminal and an inverting terminal. And then there is another resistance connected between inverting terminal and ground. So the gain of such an amplifier is 1 plus the resistance which is connected in feedback divided by this R2 resistance connected to ground. Now, similarly, we have inverting amplifier configuration. Inverting because input is connected to inverting terminal of op-amp. And here also we have a negative feedback by connecting this RF resistance from output terminal to an inverting terminal. The non-inverting terminal is simply grounded. So in such case, the output will be 180-degree out of phase with respect to input, as the gain is negative here, which is minus RF divided by Ri. That is minus feedback resistance divided by this resistance Ri. So let us now see how to design this op-amp in LTSpice. So I just play the video. So this is the same part at the beginning, which we have just discussed. So I'll just forward it and I'll come to the schematic here. So this schematic, though appears a bit complex, it can be broken down into a number of units. Okay, so the first thing is the power supply, VDD and VSS, which as per 180 nanometer technology will be plus 1.8 and minus 1.8. Then we are having a current mirror circuit for bicycle. Okay, so all these, yes. Yes, someone was speaking.
It's plus minus supply, plus minus 1.8 volt supply has been used over here instead of a unipolar supply. Like VDD and ground is not here, so VDD ground as well as minus 1.8 volt. So VSS are used together.
Yeah, so if we have ground instead of VSS, then we need to provide necessary DC bias at gate of M4 and M5 here. So instead of doing that, we are biasing through VSS minus 1.8. Then there is a current mirror circuit which is used to bias these transistors M4, M5, M1, and M2. And this is my differential amplifier. Okay, so M4 and M5 are making a differential pair. They are supposed to be identical. They are supposed to be perfectly matched. Perfectly matched in terms of mu and Cox, in terms of threshold voltage, in terms of WIL ratios. If they are not perfectly matched, then we'll see that some common mode output will be coming at this terminal. So for differential amplifier, we just want the amplification of differential signals, which are applied at gate of M4 and M5. But if these transistors are not perfectly matched, we'll see some common mode output as well, which is undesirable. This M6 NMOS connected here is working as a tail current source. So it is just a current source. I could also use an ideal current source here, but since we are designing it in VLSI, so a current source is represented, or a current source is fabricated using a MOS transistor. Okay, and the reason why the length of this NMOS can be particularly larger as compared to rest of the circuitry is that since it is working as a current source is having infinite resistance, right? And the resistance offered by a MOS is proportional to its length. So higher, so the larger the length, more will be the output resistance of this NMOS. So better it will behave as a current source. So it's difficult to show that in LT-SPICE, but in Cadence we can see that higher the length of this transistor, the more ideally it will behave like a current source. Okay, so this is my differential amplifier, and finally this is my common source amplifier. That is, the output of the differential amplifier is going to the gate of this PMOS, which is the driver here, and NMOS is serving as the load. And finally, there is an output capacitance connected here. This capacitance, which is connected between gate and drain of PMOS, it is for internal compensation. Because you see that op-amps are internally compensated. They fall under the category of directly coupled amplifier. So we are not using any blocking or coupling capacitors here at the input. Okay. Then these two transistors, M1 and M2, these are PMOS, and they are making a current mirror. Why we are using a current mirror here is in order to convert the differential output into a single-ended output. Okay, so I could just remove this diode connection from PMOS and could connect some bias voltage here. That would also work, but in that case the gain would be hard. So we do not want gain to be degraded here. That's why we are converting, or that's why we are using a current mirror. So let me play the video. So the same thing is being discussed here. Okay, so let's see how to select WIL for these transistors. So the length of all these transistors are chosen to be 180 nanometer because we are working in 180 nanometer technology. So lengths are 180 nanometer. Now this 100 microampere current is passing through this NMOS M7. Okay, so the W must be such that it can support this 100 microampere current. And in 180 nanometer, we see the typical threshold voltages of the transistors lie somewhere around 0.4 volt. So I have selected the VGS of this transistor to be around 0.65 or 0.67 volt. That is greater than threshold voltage by a good margin. So using the MOS current equation in saturation region, we can obtain W for this transistor because length is already known. VGS, I'm selecting it around 0.67 volt. Current we already know. And of course, mu and COX, that also we know. So we can obtain the W of this transistor. The W I have selected for this transistor is 4 micrometer. Yeah, so W for this transistor is selected to be 4 micrometer. Okay. Now, the same 100 microampere current we want to replicate into this branch through M6 and through M8. So the W by L ratios of M7, M6, and M8 must be identical. Okay. So W for M6 is also 4 micron, for M8 also 4 micron. Now look at the circuit under DC conditions. This 100 microampere current must be sourced from these two branches, right? Because we have already seen that M4 and M5 are perfectly matched and symmetric. So each of these branches must be able to supply 50 microampere of current, right? And since current from a MOS in saturation is proportional to width of the transistor, the widths chosen for M1, M4, M5, and M2 is half the width of M6. That is 2 micron each. Okay. Now again, through the M3, we are having 100 microampere of current. So M3 is also chosen to be 4 micrometer. Okay. By default, gain dash and KP dash in LTSpice is same. Okay. So we are not accounting for mobility here. That's why the sizing of NMOS and PMOS is same. Okay. So as you can see, M4, M5, these are 2 micron in width. Okay, so one more thing, what would be the gain of this amplifier under open loop conditions? The gain will simply be the product of the gain of differential amplifier and gain of common source amplifier. One more thing that we can notice here is that the second stage is not loading the first stage. Why so? Because the input impedance of second stage is infinite, right? Because the input is connected to gate and an ideal MOS has infinite resistance at gate. So the second stage is not loading the first stage. Hence, the total gain is just the product of individual gains. Now, let us figure out how do we know which terminal will be inverting and which one will be non-inverting. Okay. So let us suppose that I connect an AC signal at the terminal I have identified as non-INV. Okay. So I connect an AC signal at the gate of transistor M5. Okay. Now the source of this transistor NMOS M5 will be at AC ground, right? Being differential input. So the source will be at AC ground. We are applying AC signal at the gate and expecting output from the drain. So it is working as a common source amplifier, right? So whatever input I am applying at the gate of M5, it will be amplified and the output will be 180 degree out of phase at this terminal. Now this output is again going to a common source amplifier. So the phase shift from the gate of M3 PMOS to the output terminal will again be 180 degree. So you see that the total phase shift from the gate of NMOS M5 to the output terminal is 360 degree. So we can say that the output is in phase with input if it is applied at this terminal, gate of M5. That's why this terminal is non-inverting. Similarly, we can figure out that this terminal will be working as inverting. Because what happens in a differential input? If the input signal at one terminal goes up, that is, it increases, then the input signal at other terminal must decrease by same amount. That is what we mean by differential input. So say if I'm increasing the input at this terminal, the AC signal at the gate of M4 is increasing, then we'll see that the AC signal at the gate of M5 will decrease. Since the signal here is decreasing, increasing, again, the signal here will increase because 180 degree out of phase. And if a signal at the gate of PMOS M3 is increasing, then the voltage at output node should decrease because again, there is a 180 degree out of phase. So we see that if I'm increasing the strength of signal at this terminal at the gate of M4, then my output is decreasing. So this is working as an inverting terminal. So this is how we can identify non-inverting and inverting terminal. Okay, so now since we are designing inverting amplifier, we can see that there is a feedback resistance connected from output node to an inverting terminal. And then there is a resistance connected between input and inverting terminal. The non-inverting terminal is simply grounded. So let us do these connections in the schematic. Okay, so here also you can see that from output node to an inverting node, there is connected a feedback resistance of 10 kilo ohm. And then the input is connected via resistance of 1 kilo ohm. And non-inverting terminal is simply grounded, like we have just seen. So what is the theoretical gain we expect out of this amplifier in this feedback connection? It must be minus R2 by R1. That is, it must be minus 10 by 1. That is 10, right? So let us verify this using transient analysis. So before this, let me show you the input here. So the input I have connected is of 10 millivolt amplitude and 10 kilohertz frequency. I haven't taken any DC offset because I have already connected VSS as minus 1.8 here. Okay, so we do not need any DC offset here. So the strength is 10 millivolt, 10 kilohertz. Now we are running the transient analysis, and I have selected stop time to be 0.5 millisecond so that we can see 5 complete cycles of input and output in the simulation window. So I'm just selecting the input. So we can see that the input is a sinusoid of 10 millivolt amplitude. And this in blue is the output. Okay, let me go there once again. So as we can see, the output is 180 degree out of phase with respect to input. Okay, and it is going from 100 millivolt to minus 100 millivolt. So we can see a gain of minus 10 here in transient analysis. So this completes my transient analysis, and now let's go for AC analysis. So for AC analysis, I'll change my AC source. Just right click, choose as none, and select AC amplitude as 1. So why we are selecting AC amplitude as 1 is because we want to observe the gain in the simulation window. So gain is output divided by input. So if I'm keeping my input as 1, the output itself is representing the gain. So for that reason, I'm selecting AC amplitude as 1. So now to simulate, simulate, edit simulation command. Okay, doing AC analysis, type of sweep is decade because we want to obtain Bode plot. Number of points per decade is 100. Start frequency will keep it as 1 Hertz and stop frequency as 100 megahertz. So for megahertz, you can type MEG, small MEG.
Or capital M is also going to do the same thing as MEG.
So I've just placed the command and I have run AC simulation. Now, if we select the output, that itself will represent the gain. So this is AC analysis. So the gain we obtained was 10 in magnitude, right? So 20 log 10 is 20 dB. That's why we are getting 20 dB here. Since op-amp is directly coupled amplifier, we are not getting any lower cutoff frequency. But due to internal compensation, we are getting the higher cutoff frequency. And this dark line represents magnitude plot and dotted line represents phase plot. So upper cutoff frequency we can calculate. You just click on this V out, it will give you cursor. And now you will be moving that cursor to 17 dB because cutoff frequency is calculated at 3 dB below the gain, right? Maximum gain. So at 17 dB, we are having 2.218 megahertz of frequency. That's why the upper cutoff frequency is 2.218 megahertz for this amplifier. Okay, so this completes the designing of inverting amplifier using op-amp. So, any questions?
Questions?
So if we use the Miller compensation, then the pole should shift to lower frequency, right?
Yes.
Compensation capacitance, yeah.
Yes, Miller capacitance or Miller compensation technique will add an extra low pass frequency pole or low pass pole. So obviously your cutoff frequency will move slightly towards left, but depends on the capacitance. So how much capacitance, based on that, the pole's location will be determined. Now, if the pole of the due to Miller capacitance is far away, that means if the capacitance is large enough and the otherwise it is quite different, the frequency, I mean the pole generated by the Miller capacitance and the pole generated by the MOSFETs are, if they are too different in frequency, in such a case you will get to see some wavy kind of Bode plot. Okay, wavy in the sense it will come down during the first pole and then again it will go down with some little wave-like shape on the magnitude as well as phase plots. But these things are always at very higher frequency, so we generally do not operate at such high frequencies with our AC input signal.
So the negative VDD is given just to avoid the input offset given at the input, right?
Yes, yes. So typically op-amps are designed for bipolar supplies, but unipolar op-amps are also available, as you had seen earlier in Cadence. So if you can use the same VDD ground, just 1.8 and ground to power up this particular schematic. But in that case, for the non-inverting or inverting amplifier cases, wherever you are putting ground, you have to put VDD by 2 over there through a low impedance source. Okay, so wherever you see, you get to see ground, you can put VDD by 2, and wherever you see VSS here, you can put ground. But only thing is that VDD by 2 should be through a low impedance source. What do I mean? So your series resistance from the source generating VDD by 2 should be low or 0. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Any other question?
So like in the cadence diagram for the NMOS in the final stage, we had connected it to the gate terminal to the drain. But in this case, we are connecting it to the gate of the current mirror. So why is there a difference?
Which transistor? Can you name the transistors here at least?
Here it's M8.
M8. Okay. So in M8, okay. So in the cadence one, he was using a diode configured MOSFET over there. But here, Ritvik is actually biasing that output transistor M8 such that you don't need that additional diode connected. See, the point is, if you put a diode connected MOSFET, so that is also equivalent to if you can bias that diode connected MOSFET in saturation mode, it behaves like a constant current source. But if you want to change the operating point for that transistor, obviously you have to change the W, which is not possible after you fabricate the chip. But here in Ritvik's design, you can adjust the biasing point. So initially, obviously here also you cannot change the sizing once you fabricate, but at least you can change the value of I1 or the ratio of the transistor M7, M8. The ratio of width of M7, M8 can be changed. So in practical op-amps, you can even put multiple transistors with switches for M8 in order to change the biasing point. Basically, you are setting the output, whatever ID going through it. So in his case, it was basically diode connected transistor was configured because just to avoid the biasing, any biasing scheme. He was assuming biasing is either done by sizing or biasing is done through that VB source in cadence. So here also, instead of connecting the to gate of M7 and the gate of M8, you can put another voltage over here to bias it in different ways by external supply voltage, VB kind of voltage.
And so for diode connected NMOS, the gain would drop substantially, right?
Yes, that true. That depends obviously again on other factors like ambient temperature as well as how much voltage is coming to the upper op-amp. Sorry, upper MOSFET.
Okay, sir.
So for the experiment, we have to follow this, sir. Right?
Yes, you have to follow this. Preferably.
Sir?
So there is no hard and fast rule. Yeah.
Sir?
Yeah, question.
Sir, why mostly we follow the output of the differential amplifier is connected to PMOS and the load is an NMOS? Why can't we do the opposite?
Oh, okay. So so this depends actually. You can also do it in the other way. For example, you can connect to the lower MOSFET like NMOS. The output of M2 can be connected to the gate of M8, for example, assuming there is no current mirror connection for M8, and keep M3 as load. But in that case, you will get inverted output. Okay, so you will get another stage of inversion over here. And what else could be? If inverted output will be there if you connect to the input of M8, and also I guess let me think what else could be the reason. Good question. Ritvik, can you think of any other reason?
So then we need a special arrangement to bias PMOS.
Yes.
Here
So
NMOS is getting biased by the red. Yeah.
True. So in that case, you need another current source to bias PMOS circuit. So see, you need another current mirror. So here in this case, Ritvik is using one current mirror with two outputs, one through M6, other through M8. So it's all NMOS current mirror technique. But if you put PMOS as a load instead of NMOS as a load, in that case the current, so the PMOS biasing will require additional current mirror, which will increase the number of transistors employed in your design. True, Ritik, you are right. So you need another current mirror with PMOS transistors. Which will effectively increase total number of transistors in your design.
Sir, why are we using the capacitor C2?
Oh, Ritik, just comment on this.
It is for internal compensation. We want to make sure that the circuit does not become unstable before your unity gain frequency. Okay, so this capacitance plays major role to make the circuit stable so that your circuit can operate satisfactorily until your unity gain frequency.
See, there is something called stabilization time of the output, and also there is something called slew rate of an op amp. If you remember the definition of slew rate, it is the maximum rate of change of voltage at the output. Okay, so now by adjusting the value of C2, we are effectively adjusting the slew rate of this op amp. So look at this, it is connected between the drain of M2 and drain of M3, right? So that means if the output of the differential amplifier stage abruptly changes due to noise or due to any other even input signal itself, in that case the output is not allowed to change at that fast rate. Now what is the advantage if you don't allow the output to follow exactly at the very fast and instantaneous rate? The advantage is that the stability advantage. That means your op amp will not now and then go to saturation and come back. Suppose there is a slight glitch comes from the input, and that will be amplified by the first stage, and then the second stage is amplifying it further, because some product of the gain of these two stages is the final gain in open loop configuration. So now in open loop configuration or even closed loop, so if there is a sudden change in the input, so there'll be the second stage gain is actually slowed down. That means it's not allowed to immediately catch up that gain. So as a result, the op amp will stay away from saturation in case of jittery noise or some instantaneous noise. So what is the advantage? If the op amp goes into saturation, what is saturation? Op amp saturation and transistor saturations are different. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Op amp getting saturated means the op amp output is going either close to VDD or close to VSS or ground, whichever, in this case VSS. So once the op amp goes into saturation, there is a finite saturation recovery time. So that is one parameter. If you look at data sheets of commercial op amps, you will find that saturation recovery time. That means once it gets saturated due to whatever reason, it will take some time to come back. And by adjusting the value of C2, you can actually determine how late it will go to saturation. Suppose there is a little noise, you can ignore that noise, you can absorb that noise. It's like a low pass filter. Okay, you can absorb the noise. So the C2 is actually going to absorb the noise because the charge coming out through M2 and charging up C2 will get absorbed to the extent. Now instead of 1p, if you increase to larger value of picofarads, obviously your stabilization time or your op amp will be slowed down. That means your slew rate will be reduced, but your stability will be increased. Now you have to make a good judgment and selection of the value of C2 such that your op amp should not be very slow. At the same time, it should be sufficiently noise immune. So very slow op amps are also very low noise op amps. If you compare, let's say if you take 10 different data sheets of different bandwidths, gain bandwidth product for practical op amps, you'll find that slower op amps are more accurate op amps, you can say, and slower means slower slew rate. Whereas the faster op amps are also can get very easily influenced by noise, but they are, so that means they are not low noise op amps. So the inherent noise is high because the capacitance value C2 is actually low. Also, there are different other compensation techniques which are not discussed here. Okay, any other question? I'll just comment on some points before we move on to the next part of today's class. This look at the current source I1, which is 100 microampere. In practice, how do you implement that? Just think how you're going to implement an independent current source inside your chip. So that's virtually impossible, or rather practically impossible, I'll say. Virtually obviously possible, but practically impossible. So independent current source implementation on chip is not possible. So people instead use some sort of band gap reference generator. So they use that VDD 1.8 volt, and they use a band gap reference generator. So that circuit essentially maintains a constant voltage irrespective of slight change. It's like a voltage regulator, you can say. It's but much more accurate than voltage regulator. So band gap voltage reference generator is a type of voltage regulator, you can think of it, where the voltage, a particular DC voltage less than 1.8 volt will be made constant, and from that point, if you connect a fixed resistor using something like a semiconductor resistor or a diode configured MOSFET instead of this I1, then it will, and then you connect rest of the circuit like M7 and so on, it will be equivalent to having a current source I1 over here. So are you getting my point, what I just said? How you can replace this current one, because this I1 is not very practical in practical sense. There's a band gap voltage, some voltage regulator like device or some circuitry, and then the output of that voltage regulator or voltage reference generator is a very constant voltage, and then the output of the constant voltage generator is connected to the drain of the MOSFET M7. So the resistor is fixed, the voltage is fixed, that means your current is fixed. Now you can ask me another question over here, why we need those extra voltage reference or regulator like circuit? Why not VDD is good enough? In practical case, VDD is noisy because VDD is not just going to one op amp. It may, in practical circuits, it goes to 100 other chips or 100 other circuits in practical sense, including microcontrollers and others. So microcontrollers or any other digital circuit, whenever they make transition from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0, there is a lot of noise which comes and gets injected into VDD line. So VDD is not a constant hard rock stable voltage source. So VDD gets wavy, that means it gets noisy, and if VDD gets noisy, your current meter will malfunction with simple resistor. Okay, so that is why we have to use those extra circuitry, so which has been ignored over here for obvious reason that we don't want to complicate it. But you should know this, on chip ideal current source is not possible. Or you can also use some other types of basically you have to use this band gap voltage reference generator that I just said in different ways to have better and better accuracy with this current, because the accuracy of this I1 determines a lot of performance parameters subsequently in this op-amp circuit. So I1 is a current biasing device that you have to replicate by using MOSFETs and other strategies. Okay, Ritvik, let's move on to the next part.
Okay, sir. So now we will be simulating non-inverting amplifier configuration. So before just moving on, I want to mention one thing, that how W by L ratios of M4 for an M5 impact everything. Okay, so if so first of all, the current in these branches, it is defined by this current mirror circuit, right? So 50 microampere is flowing through each branch, and if I move W towards lower values, that is, if I decrease W, then in order to maintain the same constant current of 50 microampere, the VGS of this transistor has to increase, right? And VGS of this transistor plus VDS of M6 NMOS is equal to 1.8 volt. So as you continue to decrease W, your VGS becomes larger and larger to maintain same current, and there is a small room left for VDS of this transistor. So there would come a point when the VDS of this transistor falls sufficiently below so that it gets out of saturation and enters triode mode. And this current mirror will then no longer work. That is, our entire design will go haywire, right? So it is imperative to maintain an optimum value of width of these transistors, because if we increase W too much, then we are of course increasing the gate capacitances of these transistors, which will make the circuit sluggish. So there is a trade-off involved. Now, for a non-inverting amplifier, I'm using the exactly same schematic, but now the input is connected to the non-inverting terminal of this op-amp. So we have already seen how to identify inverting and non-inverting terminal. So I'm connecting a sinusoid of 0 DC offset. There is no DC offset, 10 millivolt and 10 kilohertz. And of course, there is a feedback connected from output terminal via a resistance of 9 kilo ohm to the inverting terminal of op-amp. So for such an amplifier, we know that the gain will be 1 plus R2 by R1, which in this case is 1 plus 9K divided by 1K. So 10 would be the gain here. And of course, the output would be in same phase with respect to input. So the same thing is being explained here. Okay. So now we are running the transient analysis for this amplifier. So again, stop time is 0.5 millisecond because we have chosen a signal of 10 kilohertz. So I just want to see 5 complete cycles of input and output. That's why 0.5 milli. Now we'll select input.
In your simulations, you can choose any other timing. So don't blindly follow every parameter.
So this is my input signal in red from 10 millivolt to minus 10 millivolt. And now we are seeing the output. Okay, so this is output in blue. As you can see, it is in same phase with respect to input, and the gain is 10 here. So this completes our transient analysis. Now we'll be doing AC analysis. So right click on the AC source, select as none, and select AC amplitude as 1. Now go to simulate, edit simulation command, AC analysis. Type of sweep will be decade since we want Bode plot. Number of points 100 we can select. And start and stop frequency, same as previous case, 1 and 100 megahertz respectively. Now let's run the simulation. Now when we click output, this will give us the Bode plot. So again, the gain was 10. That's why 20 log 10 is 20 dB. So the dark line here is magnitude plot and dotted line is phase plot. And as already seen that we do not have any lower cutoff frequency, but only upper cutoff frequency. And that we can calculate. So you can just click on V out, it will give you cursor and then we'll go up to 17 dB to get the corresponding frequency. So the frequency we are getting here is around 2.39 megahertz. That is our upper cutoff frequency.
You can also calculate phase margin from these plots.
Okay, so you can always play with the values of R1 and R2 to obtain different gains for your amplifier. Now we'll be seeing two special cases. The first one is a voltage follower configuration. In this case, the output terminal is simply shorted to the inverting terminal, and the input is applied at non-inverting terminal. So for such a configuration, we must be getting output exactly as the replica of input. So let us see. So this is the circuit we are implementing. This is the schematic. So the output must exactly match input. So let us run transient analysis to verify the same. So this is my input in red. And now this is the output in blue. So both are exactly overlapping each other, which is expected. So this is the implementation of voltage follower. Now we want to see open loop condition here. So for that, what we would do is that we will simply remove this feedback connection, right, which is coming from output terminal to the inverting terminal. I'll just cut out this connection and I will connect this inverting terminal to ground. So now input is connected to non-inverting terminal and inverting terminal is connected to ground. There is no feedback connection. And in such case, we expect op-amp to be saturated even for small values of input. So the output will no longer be sinusoid, but it will be saturated. It will somewhat resemble a square waveform. So let us see that. So I'm just cutting out the feedback connection. And now connecting inverting terminal to ground. So now our op-amp is open loop. So the circuit should now behave as a comparator instead of an amplifier. Of course, for extremely small values of input, it can produce the reliable output, maybe of the order of few microvolts. But for this large input, it will saturate. So this is input and this is output in blue, which is almost approaching the supply voltages plus 1.8 and minus 1.8 volt. So the output is saturated under open loop conditions. It is behaving as a comparator.
So you can change the voltage at the input of the inverting terminal. Instead of ground, you can put any DC voltage and you can see the output, the pulse width of the output of that square-like signal is going to change. So in open loop op-amp means it's a comparator. So although real practical comparators are slightly optimized for reducing power consumption, because while the comparator output is either close to VDD or close to VSS, so there is a lot of current or power consumption that happens within this chip or within the op-amp. So in order to reduce that, the practical comparators actually adjust some parameters in order to reduce the power consumption. But actually the op-amp in open loop is recognized as a simple comparator, and in simple comparator it just compares the two voltages. I think you must be very much aware of a comparator action of an op-amp. Okay, so here we are comparing the non-inverting input voltage with respect to 0, which is connected to inverting input voltage, inverting input terminal. So you can change inverting input terminal and then see the effect of the output. So you should be able to play around with the parameters of these resistors, or the sizing of the MOSFETs, or even the voltages, or respective current for biasing and so on. So I need to see some changes in your design, as I said, because that's what some small changes that you can always incorporate and still come and arrive to very close by similar result, but slightly different than each other. Okay, any question? Any question on non-inverting amplifier or unity gain amplifier? So voltage follower is also called as unity gain amplifier.
So here the open loop gain is almost like infinite. That's why it is saturating. So is it because that spice is taking the very ideal values compared to the cadence part we got?
True, that is true to quite some extent, because here we are considering idealistic MOSFETs, but in Cadence it was working on the PDK, which is process design kit information for the practical MOSFETs used in TSMC 180 process. Yeah, but in practice, in there also, if you do the sizing with Cadence transistors, you can still arrive to the similar result. That is possible. So op-amp in open loop should have very large gain. So 28 dB in the previous case was bit lower side, I'll say. It's actually not very good design, but obviously we can optimize the same design, just keep the same circuit, adjust the sizing and adjust the biasing. You'll come back to similar result, as you can see over here. Also, have a look that here that C2 capacitor is missing between the drain terminals of M2 and M3, or the output stage and the differential stage, upper transistors, PMOS. So it's not mandatory that you should keep that capacitor. And another thing, if you don't keep that capacitor, if you apply a square wave at the input instead of sine, you'll find lots of glitches at the output. That means there will be sharp spikes during the transitions. Unless you right.
So that capacitor also served as a negative feedback, right? Like
Yes,
some kind of.
It is. It is. And that is why you are getting stability, because stability is very closely linked with negative feedback. So if you have positive feedback, it will become more unstable. So it will try to oscillate. So you can also use the op-amp as an oscillator, where you apply positive feedback. Look at this inverting and non-inverting amplifier circuits. All the resistor feedbacks are applied to minus input. It is never going to the positive input in both inverting and non-inverting amplifier. So one such reason why it is so, because of improved stability, and you need so that resistor feedback, resistor R2 or RF, whatever you call it, improves stability of your op-amp. And so as that capacitor, if we connect it towards the output side, that between the two drain terminals of M2 and M3 in this diagram.
Sir, if no one else has any questions about op-amp, can I ask a question about the previous experiment?
Yeah, sure. So let's ask others first. Any other questions on op-amp side?
So,
Yeah.
if we connect the Miller compensation, then which node would be the dominating pole? Would it be the output pole or the first stage node?
That depends on the value of the capacitance, because the dominating pole means what? So the pole that comes first, okay, that comes at a lower frequency. So that's the dominating pole, you can say. But it is Miller capacitance will give you one first order pole, and your remaining MOSFETs will contribute possibly to the second pole. So combined together, it becomes a second order system or even higher order system. So the dominating pole depends on what is the value of your Miller feedback capacity or Miller capacitance. Okay, any other question? Okay, I can take the question on the next previous experiment. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, so basically in the previous experiment, we used a PMOS as a current source load, right? We provided it with some kind of voltage to drive it, the overdrive voltage, and that was fixed. So it decided a current, and the lower NMOS was where we were applying the input, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So according to that model, so suppose if you look at the output terminal, so we have been taught like this, the gain can be characterized by effective GM into the R out, right? So the effective GM remains the GM of the NMOS only, because the PMOS cannot affect it, and the R out becomes basically R up parallel R down, right? So
RD parallel R.
yeah, RU parallel RD, and RU will be looking into the drain of this particular configuration, and I reckon it comes to be about R naught, right? Like R naught parallel with some, if there was some RL, but since there is no RL, so R naught, and lower side also is the same case, and therefore because of the effective resistance being large, R naught parallel R naught, so R naught by 2, this has a very large gain, correct?
Yeah.
So if we what exactly happens if you change even by a small bit? So if you change the overdrive voltage from initially it's set to 0.1, if you change it to 0.15, and the gain, instead of becoming a positive gain, it becomes attenuation. So the only reason I can think of is that since R naught is given by 1 by lambda ID, so is it that the ID is increasing drastically, that it's all totally taking everything else down? Or similarly, when you change the W of any of these transistors, W of P or W of N, it takes it directly, from very high gain to attenuation. So is that also on the same basis? I'm thinking about it this
Okay, so if you are saying that the biasing voltage or the overdrive, whatever you're calling, 0.1 to 0.15, so that's 50 millivolt change in biasing voltage. So that's quite a bit of change in 180 nanometer process, given the sizing of the transistor. So 50 millivolt, 0.15 to 0.1, so that is quite a large change. So typically we don't encounter such change in the biasing voltage unless you have an extremely noisy biasing source, which is very unlikely. Okay, so as I said, biasing is always taken extra care of through the band gap voltage references and so on. So the change in biasing voltage is very little, but the change in RO, obviously lambda ID, so you have to set the value of ID by selecting appropriate VGS of the MOSFET. Okay, so now you have to make sure the upper transistor, the PMOS transistor, should always be in the saturation mode. So that is another requirement by design. Okay, so another design requirement that you should always bias the transistors in saturation mode so that slight change in the VDS should not affect your ID, given your VGS is constant. But the VGS is only changing for the lower transistor, right? VGS is changing for the lower transistor, and that subsequently changes the parameter for the upper transistor, the PMOS load, because you're talking about common source amplifier with active load. So I'm not sure whether I got your question in your long explanation correctly, that you are saying that how accurate is the gain or how stable is the gain over the entire signal input range. Is that the question you are asking?
So I'm asking, no, actually I'm asking that given that I changed overdrive voltage of the PMOS, or I changed the width of the PMOS or the NMOS, so why do these small changes totally annihilate the gain? Like in at least the where we were using a resistive load, such small changes would maybe increase or decrease the gain, but would not make a device which is giving you a gain to a device which is giving you an integration, right? So like that is what I'm asking. That is the only reason is that R up is changing, and since R up if becomes too small, then it parallel with RD will become too small. Is that it? The R up here being the PMOS resistance.
Okay, so you mean upper transistor resistance. See, if you change the input voltage VGS, your ID is actually changing, okay, for both the transistors. You agree to this?
Yes.
Now, once ID is changing for upper as well as lower transistor, so RO is changing. So that is 1 upon lambda ID is changing.
Yes.
Okay, so if RO is changing, so you are saying that RO parallel to RD, or the R small RO of the lower transistor. So the RO, both the ROs coming in parallel to each other, while into GM is the total gain.
Yes.
Okay, so now the value of small RO is not very large. That is one thing to be considered. And the value of lambda is also not very large value. So that means delta RO for both the transistors is actually changing, but it is not changing over a very, very large range. That's also another point to be considered. You should keep that in mind, that the small RO definitely changes, but it doesn't change over the very large range. It's not like a variable resistor having a very large dynamic range. It is having only a finite range of resistance, and that's why the single stage amplifier cannot give you a very large gain. For very large gain, you have to cascade more than one stages. So small RO change of both the transistors due to input change is going to give you basically various gains. So you're saying that gain is not constant over various input voltages. So that's your concern, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So obviously there is a slight variation in the gain, and that gain variation is definitely. I mean, you cannot ignore it 100%. There must be some change in the gain during the over entire signal range. So that is why there is something called input dynamic range which comes into picture. We never discussed that for op-amp based amplifiers as well as normal common source or differential amplifier. We consider one parameter called as input signal range. So what is that input dynamic range or input signal range? That means the minimum and maximum value over which you should be applying the input. So if your input goes beyond that limit, then your transistor amplifier is not guaranteed to work in a very well-defined manner. So it might either leave saturation and do something else in triode or cutoff. So it depends which way it is going. So definitely your absolute value of gain is not is never constant, never a constant number. The absolute value of gain over the entire signal range is experiencing some variation. Okay, so although we consider idealistic, in an ideal case, the gain is a constant number, it's a fixed number. But in reality, the gain is never a rock stable number. You must be encountering little change in the gain over your signal range. And that is why that input dynamic range or input range, voltage range is determined or defined for any amplifier circuit. So it is definitely not a constant number. So that's my answer.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so does that clarify all parts of your question? If I am, or you are asking also something else?
Yeah, so more or less, because like, you know, I realize right now that ID is dependent on V overdrive whole square, whereas GM itself is dependent only on V overdrive. So if you multiplied them, it becomes inversely proportional to V overdrive, right? So if we increase the V overdrive, the total gain is expected to decrease, right?
Yeah.
Sir, I have a doubt regarding the last experiment, like what all parameters we have to change rather than W/L ratio. Like changing capacitors wouldn't affect much in the transient and frequency response.
So in the previous experiment, only W/L ratio is okay, or slight changes in supply voltage is also okay. And
Sir, but supply
obviously,
voltage would be 1.8, right? According to
not
180.
necessarily. No, not necessarily. You can keep it at 1.6 or 2. So you can slightly overdrive them, and even you can keep up to 2.5 or 3, because there are transistors, although in cadence those transistors are accessible, where you can give you can apply supply voltages up to 3 volt. Even 5 volt versions are also available. So 2.5 up to 2.5 is okay. So in a given PDK, there are different transistors which are given in its library. So I'll possibly show that sometime through another video, or I'll ask Arnab to do that, where you will find that in a given library, there are several NMOS transistors available. So let's say TSMC can fabricate about 10 different types of NMOS transistors within 180 nanometer. So the minimum length could be 180, but you can go to higher length also. So that's another rule of thumb, that minimum possible length is 180 nanometer. You can change it to higher than 180, like into 2 or into 4 kind of 180 nanometer. So wider transistors, wider lengths are okay. But in general, we consider all L should be constant, but that's not a hard and fast rule. And within, even if you keep L to be same, there are different types of overdrive voltage, or basically there are different types of stress levels that you can provide. That means in a MOSFET, there are horizontal electric field and vertical electric fields, right? From gate to substrate, there is a vertical electric field. From drain to source, there is a horizontal electric field. So the interaction between these two electric field also plays a lot of things, and you can engineer those, or rather play around with those electric fields just by applying the gate changes in gate voltages. That is one way we commonly use it. But changes in VDS is another interesting way, where you can still control the horizontal electric field, and obviously beyond certain limit it goes to triode or cutoff, but mostly we work with saturation mode of operation. Okay, so you can always change the supply voltage. So in short, you can always change the supply voltage. You can always increase the length, don't decrease it, and play out with the parameters. Okay. Any other question? I think let me check the chat box. Someone I think I received an email from one of you that he was unable to submit the assignment even after extended deadline. So now this is the problem. How can I justify and mark it equally if you don't go in a team of students together and follow the same deadline for everyone? I cannot extend the deadline for 1 or 2 students. Okay, so I don't do that kind of favorism without a valid reason. So if you have a medical reason, obviously I'll do it. But if you miss the deadline even the second time, I give you about 2 days time from the email date. That's actually asking for too much, in my opinion. So I'll see what I can do. I'll talk to Professor Vivek Dixit and we will jointly decide about the policies about too late this submission. I gave already one extended submission date. So for the common source one, I'm not going to extend the deadline. So please make sure that you are submitting on time by tomorrow. Okay. Further questions? Okay, I'll take attendance now. Okay, I've taken the attendance. Okay, so if you have any question, you can stay back and ask, and otherwise, students can leave.
Sir, I had a question regarding the previous experiment.
Yeah, sure. Tell me.
So, like the PMOS here is being used as a current source, right?
Yeah, you can say as a load. Yeah, you can source as a current source load.
So, because it is being given a fixed bias, so like the VSG of the PMOS is fixed, and with the length also, like with the W by L ratio also being fixed, it is acting as a fixed current source.
True, true.
Sir, so like, so when we change the W by L ratio of the NMOS, sir, so the current in the resulting circuit also changes. Sir, so why are we like, why do we say that it is a current source exactly?
No. See, while you change the W by L value of the lower transistor, see, if you define it or bias the upper transistor in saturation mode, so it behaves like a constant current source. Now, if you change the value of W by L for the bottom transistor, now there is a kind of competition that actually happens, you can say. Okay, so let's look at it in slightly different way. You can change the W by L ratio of the lower transistor, and given the input signal is coming, that is changing the basically the resistance, drain to source resistance, that is RDS, capital RDS actually changes with the instantaneous value of the VGS of the MOSFET, lower MOSFET, like NMOS. Okay, so if you change that VGS, so as a result, RDS is changing, but due to that, there is an extra voltage drop that comes across the current source. So you have to understand how a current source works. So forget about MOSFETs for the time being. So what is a current source? A current source will maintain a constant current, and the corresponding voltage across the current source depends on through which external device or load through which it is passing that current. So if you consider Ritvik's that current source with biasing lower transistor, so the current source was driving a transistor, below that, right? That 100 microampere. So the sizing of the transistor, the biasing of the transistor, what is the VGS of the transistor, those are all separate issues, and the current source doesn't know what are those, what is the VGS of the lower transistor, what is the sizing of the transistor. All it knows that it has to transfer or it has to force 100 microampere current, and for that to happen, it will adjust the voltage across the current source such that you always maintain a constant current. Now, if I change the VGS, so assume a current source is there above a NMOS transistor. So current source is going to provide certain voltage at the drain terminal of the NMOS based on the RDS value of the NMOS transistor. So due to change in VGS or due to change in W by L ratio, RDS of the NMOS is going to change. If RDS is changing, that means the voltage at the drain terminal is also going to be different. So that means it is going to change as per the current source requirement, because current source wants to force a constant current through the NMOS. Now, if I change the W by L ratio of the lower transistor, again the same thing will happen. So my RDS will be changing for the lower transistor, NMOS transistor, whereas the upper transistor will adjust the voltage across itself. That means the VDS of the upper transistor will either increase or decrease based on the lower transistor, whether decrease or increase in RDS of the lower transistor, while satisfying KVL while satisfying the KVL equation, because you have a fixed VDD, because the upper side of the current source is a fixed voltage. So any current source should have at least a dropout voltage. So that is one parameter of a current source. So any current source must have a dropout voltage, any practical current source, not ideal. Okay, so does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. So so in order to solve like the VSD and the VDS of the PMOS and NMOS respectively, like can they be analytically solved like through just equations?
Yes, absolutely. It can be solved. It can be solved. So you have to work out through the R-on equations for both the transistors, and then you have to find out. So you can think of those two transistors at two different resistors in voltage divider configuration. Okay, so in a common source amplifier with active load can be visualized as two different resistors, one top of each other between VDD and ground. Now, assuming the upper resistor is somehow maintaining a constant current, so you can replace the upper resistor with a constant current. So that's the only case while it will happen. Now, if you change the lower, if you change the value of the lower resistor, the upper resistor should actually increase in voltage. So if the value of lower resistance is reducing, the upper resistance should decrease, and vice versa, such that you maintain the overall current in the loop to be constant between the VDD and ground. Are you getting my point?
Yes, sir.
So you have to basically maintain a total resistance between your VDD and ground to be constant. So now if the lower resistance is increasing, the upper resistance should automatically decrease. That is one way of looking at things. And another way that I mentioned previously, that if the upper one is a perfect current source, the current source has the ability to adjust the voltage across itself in order to maintain a constant current through the load through which it is driving its current.
Yes, sir. But the thing is that if we change the W by L ratio of the lower resistor, also the current is getting changed.
Yeah. So what is going to change due to W by L ratio? It is going to change the resistance, RDS.
Yes, sir.
And the other RDS is automatically adjusted in the opposite way. So always
Yes, sir,
think.
got it.
Yeah. So always think transistors in terms of some sort of resistance between source and drain. Obviously, it's not passive resistance. So this is an active kind of resistance. And resistance with a fixed voltage is equivalent to a current source. Okay. Any other question? Okay. Since many people have already left the class as per the instructions, so no problem. So let's close the class today. I'll stop recording.